Joining me is the chairman of the ECA, Kester Nanku, and the interim CEO, Stephanie Fingal. Good morning to the both of you.
Good morning to you and to all your listeners.
And viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. Ms. Fingal, I wanted to start with you. The country is fast-tracking its vaccination drive. However, GML has reported one man is saying that his company is forcing him to take a vaccine he does not want. Pivoting off of that, can companies force their employees to be vaccinated? And if the answer is yes, should they force their employees to be vaccinated?
That has been a tricky question for us for the past few weeks. And our president of the industrial court has spoken about this. And as you know, in our country, we do not have legislation for employers to make the vaccination mandatory. Now, there might be different, very good reasons. And I would like to start off by saying employers are asking employees to take the vaccine for two main reasons. And in my view, it is first of all to have safe employees, to be safe at work and to be able to come to work, not get infected, and perhaps not infect other persons were they to be carriers of the COVID-19 and be unaware of it. The second thing is, of course, employers, businesses, people want to reopen the businesses. And in opening businesses, what happens? Employees return to work. You know that we have a number of employees right now who are either at home with no pay, and some who are at home on reduced work and reduced pay, or not working at all and getting some sort of stipend from their companies. So returning to work for us in this environment of COVID-19, and in Trinidad, of course, we have experienced the very difficult increase that we have had to manage. It is important for employers to want the best safety and health in the workplace, and they do have an obligation as well under the OSH Act. Like employees have an obligation under the OSH Act to ensure safety, health, and well-being for themselves and others in the workplace. So employers are really asking for persons to take the vaccine, not because you want to impose your will upon them, but it is because of what we have experienced and this urgent need by both employees and employers to return to business. It's not going to be business as usual, as we all know, because even if you are vaccinated, you still have to be concerned about the spread. It's not absolutely, an outcome that will prevent you at all from getting the infection. So still you have all those safety and health protocols that must be observed. And in some industries, you would find employers have third parties. They might be part of multinationals or some big investor. And depending on what they may have as their rules and regulations, depending on the nature of the operations, the proximity of workers in the workspace automatically might create a problem. Do you then indefinitely keep people away from work when there's a vaccine that is available? Now we come to the issue of availability. Once that vaccine becomes available to the rank and file employee and those potential employees, the expectation is that you would get the vaccine, you would take the vaccine. Principally for safety and health in the workplace, and of course for a selfish reason, to preserve your health and life. We know that there are families where fathers and mothers have died and the children remain orphaned. So when we examine it both as employee and employer, you see the reason why an employer will want to say to an employee, I want you to take the vaccine. And if the employer is saying that, and it is legally allowed, then there are other things that he must do: consult with the workers, educate the workers, and all of those things, even if it is legislated. So I would say that would be my response this morning on the issue.
Now, I wanted to bring Mr. Nanku into the conversation. I'm wondering if what is being required now, or what is being suggested from the ECA, is that companies create a COVID or a vaccination policy, and how are you all helping companies navigate that particular requirement or suggestion?
Well, the thing about it, just following up on what Stephanie has said, and she has really created a great context. I think policies and company policies it's all designed, it must be designed to motivate, inspire, and encourage employees to be vaccinated. Now, when you look at the WHO, who we have been, the institution that we have been following as a country in terms of their advice and guidance, you know, they have been talking about persuasion, moral suasion, you know, before we get into any kind of mandatory realm of the vaccination program. That is going to require a huge education program. It's going to require communication that is compelling, designed specifically to shift the mindset of those who are not so inclined. So it's really about education and helping people. And that in and of itself will serve to inform the policies that employers will, in fact, be contemplating in terms of the introduction. Now, just to add a little bit more, a lot of this has to do, as Stephanie said, with dialogue, with consultation. And over the last, because it's uncharted territory that we are entering into as it relates to a mandatory vaccination program, and again, finding its way into policies, it really depends on the jurisdiction and the framework that the government has in place to deal with that. For example, you have a number of countries. We have seen the USA responding to that. We have seen the Equal Opportunity Commission in the US, you know, weighing in on it, providing guidance in terms of how employers should treat with the vaccination to motivate and encourage people to do so. Australia also, they have, you know, the government can technically make people vaccine mandatory because they're brought powers in a public health emergency. You have more recently the European Court of Human Rights, who has last Thursday upheld a judgment that it will not contravene human rights law.
So, Mr. Nanku, let me just interrupt you to offer guidance specific to Trinidad and Tobago. So the Attorney General has said our government has not yet decided whether they're going to make the taking of COVID-19 vaccines mandatory. So it's something that they are considering, but a decision has not been made. And I wanted to change the conversation slightly to what is the role of the ECA during these times in terms of providing support and advice to employers as they navigate this whole issue of a vaccine policy and just in general the changing of their workplace, where people are now working at home where they don't typically, where they may not have before?
Well, our reason for being is advocacy. So what we have been doing in terms of providing bulletins, informing employers as to how best to navigate in the current set of circumstances. And we will continue to do this. As a matter of fact, we are part of a movement to build momentum, to educate and inform, as I have alluded to earlier, because this is about how do you persuade, how do you convince, you know, the employer to the employer and the employee to participate in a vaccination program that, as Stephanie said, is in the best interest of themselves and the wider society.
That's definitely a challenge. I wanted to bring Stephanie back into the conversation and switch a little bit. Obviously, this has been a year where a lot of people, separate and apart from vaccinations, before we even reach the issue of to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, people have been working at home. What are some of the challenges that employers have been coming to you and speaking to you about that process, the adjustment process of having so many workers who would ordinarily be in the office now being forced to switch location?
Well, first of all, where we have employees working from home, employers would have done that as far as is practicable So employers who have made that decision would have had to take things into account, such as the nature of the job that the employee is performing and whether the service that is to be delivered to their clients and customers can be delivered from home. And in those cases, they have implemented the work from home. The challenge has been for where you might have some of the workers, for reasonable and practicable reasons, they are unable to work from home. So they've had to decide, how do you treat with those persons? Do you pay them? Do they proceed on leave? Do you give them part of the pay and things like that? So we have been guiding, and it always depends. We have to remember we are in a unionized environment as well. If there are unions, there must be consultation with unions where you have a CLA in place, a recognized majority union. If there are already, you have policies and leave and things like that, or layoff and all of those things, you will have to refer to those policies.
Stephanie, let me interrupt you a second because we need to break to go to news, but we're going to come back to the both of you staying with us here on the Morning Brew on CNC3. Now, before we went to news, we were talking to Kirsten Nanku and Stephanie Fingal of the Employers Consultative Association. We wanted to continue our conversation, and I interrupted Ms. Fingal from responding to concerns that, what are some of the concerns that your members have been coming to you since dealing with this past year with a lot of employees who aren't ordinarily working from home, who are now being forced to work from home. I just wanted to let you kind of conclude your thoughts on that question.
Yes, so I was saying that employers do have the challenges as to how to treat with those. So you have those who are working from home because it's practicable to do so, and then you have those who are unable to do so, all in the same company. So making that distinction and the treatment of those persons is one of the issues that employers have to deal with. Then you have the issue of being assured that there is productivity at home, that there is safety and health at home, that people have the right equipment, that they have good bandwidth, and all the other issues associated with technology. Those things are turning up, and employers then have to be monitoring closely, keeping in touch, putting systems in place such as work logs and having routine meetings to get updates and things like that, and perhaps doing a little more checking. For instance, if you have to sign documents and you do not have electronic signatures in place, or you even want to be sure that you're not compromised for security reasons in using electronic signatures, all those are now issues that employers are having to deal with and to seek advice, and you have to get professional advice on how you treat with those things. They must remember as well that employees who are working from home are still eligible to leave. You might still feel ill. You might still have a business appointment. So you may want to ask for time off based on your terms and conditions of employment. And employers have to ensure that the systems and procedures for those things are also maintained. Perhaps someone wants vacation leave. You still apply for your vacation leave. It still depends on the exigencies of the operations for approval. Things like that must continue. So employers really are asking those questions, and the guidance is what you do in the office, those systems, those procedures, those policies will still apply, except that you have your employees working from home. And you still remind them of the health and safety protocols that they should observe, and even the social distancing in the household, because you might have an ill relative, which could still cause you to contract the virus, and then you cannot work. So, you know, it's a mix of things occurring, and the advice is really fluid. You know, as things occur, we continue to advise for outside of the general concerns.
Yes, this entire COVID-19 pandemic has just been an extremely fluid situation. I had made a reference before to a man that we reported on in Guardian Media who said that, you know, he doesn't have a problem getting the vaccine. He just he takes issue with the vaccine being made available to him, and that he was worried that his company was forcing him to be vaccinated. Have you all been getting those kind of concerns from your employers who are saying, you know, how do we deal with our employees and their willingness or lack of willingness to be vaccinated? What are some of the concerns that your members are telling you that they're facing from their employees?
Well, if Stephanie, you want me to take that, or you go ahead?
Go ahead, I'll join you. I'll add if there's time.
Yeah, this thing about it, as I stated earlier, this is about how do you motivate and encourage people? Because keep in mind that some people who are not inclined to take the vaccine, they would need to understand and better appreciate the why of it. Okay? And this is why consultation, this is why, education, and not just education, but how do we continuously, it's like advertising. You need to bombard the end user so that at some point in time, that individual recognizes the significance of acting in a particular way. So it's really, what are the things we can put in place as employers to motivate, inspire, and encourage the use of the vaccination? And there's so much literature around, but we have to provide that information in a way, because you keep in mind you're dealing with different segments of the population. So what may appeal to one segment may not necessarily appeal to the other segment. So that's where the communication specialists, really come into play, so that they can find ways that will resonate and influence the behavioral changes that are necessary. Stephanie, you can jump in.
Yeah. So I'll say in a client to ECA relationship, we have advised the very thing I said earlier. Consultation with workers. Really find out from people, perhaps even individual conversations, what really are your concerns? If you have an employee assistance program provider, you probably could invite them to also meet with groups of employees who are, not inclined or hesitant about the vaccine. We have also advised having a medical practitioner, somebody who is respected and would be credible, to come in to speak with the workers. Because remember, a lot of the information being bandied about, it's from social media and so on. I'm not condemning social media, it has its purpose. But because this is a workplace and we want to have consistent information, we want to get away from the myths and deal with the realities, we are advising, I have advised, I should say, that you perhaps invite a medical person to come in so that they get an accurate medical understanding. Because let's remember, education is key. This is universal. When people are uninformed or wrongly informed or partially informed, they are, it's difficult for them to make a decision that might be in their best interests. And of course, let's not forget, nobody is going to introduce a mandatory vaccine, not even the government, where you have incidents of persons being, for medical reasons, contraindicated and cannot take that vaccine. You will not force them to take it if you are aware that medically it is going to be detrimental for them, as well as you might have other factors that will be of key concern. Those things will always be taken into account. So for persons who have genuine or serious medical conditions, and so all of those things will be provided for. And we have advised employers to consider all of those things. Have someone coming, perhaps when it's too close to home, people mightn't take you on too much. But if you have someone who is external to the organization as a credible information source, as I said, your counselors and so, you should be able to, over time, maybe not immediately, but to get your employees to take the vaccine. And I took the vaccine and I feel comfortable. You really do feel more comfortable walking around and being able to do things while still maintaining all the protocols. So it's a matter of fear for some. It's a matter of, just perhaps some people just saying they can't force me to do anything. So if the more you force, the more they might resist. So conversation, consultation, education, I believe would be the way to go. And we have advised employers to approach it that way for those who are resistant.
Thank you for sharing that you took the vaccine. I think it's really important that we get a lot more people publicly saying that they've taken the vaccine. I've said it on the show before. I've also received my first dose of the vaccine. I wanted to ask Mr. Nanku about future-proofing. We've had a lot more people working from home than we are accustomed to because it was forced upon us. Are you getting the sense from your membership that more companies are going to embrace this flexible working culture that we have been brought into?
That's absolutely correct. I've seen organizations who would have been renting space, and given the nature of their business, they have now discovered over the last 15 months that, hey, A light bulb just went off. We can, in fact, run this business without renting all the space that, so organizations, companies have made the decision to save money, to reduce their expenses in that regard, having people working, from home. Now, what Stephanie said earlier, this is a work in progress because you now need, the OSH Act and so on to create better alignment in terms of having to work from home and in the workplace, because some households are not really structured for it, and one has to take that into consideration. As she said, the whole question of things like managing performance, employers are having, challenges around that. And we're not going to go back to where we were, so that we might as well begin to think into what this new future is going to require of the employer-employee relationship.
And I think that's a brilliant way to end our conversation. Keston Nanku is the chairman of the Employers Consultative Association, and he's being joined by the interim CEO, Stephanie Fingal. Thank you for the both of you for speaking to us. And I will be looking out to see, how businesses operate in the post-COVID era. Hopefully more people will be allowed to work from home if they need to. So thanks both of you for joining us. We are going to take a very quick break, but when we come back, everyone